My uncle was a philosopher, a wise man, always speaking in riddles, telling stories that at the time I never truly understood. At family gatherings, he would say things like, "One day you will see that the world chases shadows, but the light is always within." Back then I'd nod, pretend I understood, and move on with my life, chasing success, worrying about what others thought, feeling restless for more. But now at 80, I sit on the chair in my study, through the window, looking out at the world with a knowing smile. And suddenly, everything he tried to teach me makes sense. The things we stress over, the battles we fight, the expectations we carry, most of them simply don't matter after 70. You know how, as a youth in your prime, you were all about going to college to get a degree and all that, in order to put your life together, and all of a sudden you are a business owner who never needed a degree to be financially free. You know that feeling. Don't misunderstand me. Education is very, very important for a society to grow. But hope you understand the message I'm trying to pass, which is, there comes a time that certain things just don't make sense or tickle your fancy anymore. And today, I want to share with you the 10 things that life teaches you to let go of after 70, so you can start living with wisdom now, rather than later. Did you know that a study from Harvard's 75-year-long research on happiness found that the key to a fulfilling life isn't money, fame, or achievements? It's the quality of our relationships and our ability to let go of unnecessary burdens? Yet, so many of us spend decades chasing things that, in the end, have little meaning. In fact, surveys show that people in their 70s and 80s report greater happiness and peace than those in their 40s, despite having fewer years ahead than behind. Why? Because after 70, they've learned what truly matters and what doesn't. And trust me, some of these will shock you. Welcome to Wisdom in Abundance, where we share the life-changing insights that can transform the way you see the world. I'm your wisdom professor, and if you believe in lifelong learning and discovering the deeper truths of life, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we drop daily videos on wisdom, self-growth, and ageless life lessons. Now let's dive into the 10 things that just don't matter after 70, starting with the most surprising one. Number 1. The opinion of others. You spent decades caring about what people thought of you. Guess what? Most of them weren't even paying attention. And the ones who did? They forgot. Not because they're cruel, but because people think about themselves 95% of the time, and research proves it. According to a study from the National Institute on Aging, over 80% of people's daily thoughts are self-focused. That means while you were losing sleep over what someone said about you, they probably moved on by dinner time. But here's the twist. This doesn't mean you should become careless, rude, or indifferent. No, wisdom is about balance. But at 70, you finally understand something deeper. Most people's opinions don't add value to your life. Here's the hard truth. People's opinions are like the wind, always changing, never stable. One day they praise you, the next day they criticize you. And by 70, you finally understand. Seeking approval is exhausting, and it never really mattered. A 75-year-old woman once said, "I spent years worrying about how I looked, how I dressed, and what people would say. At 70, I realized no one ever complimented me as much as I criticized myself. So now, I wear what makes me happy, say what I mean, and live with peace." It's okay to listen, to learn, to grow. But at 70, you understand something deeper. You can't sacrifice your happiness for the approval of people who won't be there when it truly matters. And if that truth doesn't shake you up, wait until you hear the next one. It's even more unsettling. Number 2. Status and wealth. Wait, what? You're probably thinking, what is he talking about? Who doesn't need wealth and status? And I get it, because for most of our lives, we're told that money equals success and status equals respect. But here's what no one tells you. After 70, none of it matters the way you thought it would. The world convinces you that your net worth defines your value, that people will respect you more if you have the title, the house, the car, the power. But when you're older, you realize your wealth doesn't buy you more time and your status doesn't guarantee love. And nothing proves this more than the story of one of the richest men in modern history, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, a billionaire, revolutionized technology, changed the world with Apple, and had more money than he could ever spend. But in his last days, despite all his success, he admitted, "I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. But at this moment, lying in this hospital bed, I realized that all the recognition and wealth I took so much pride in fades in the face of death. In the end, what matters is the memories of love, not the illusions of wealth." A man who had it all realized too late that status didn't save him, and money couldn't buy time. And if you think this is just an opinion, here's a fact. According to a study from Princeton University, once you earn $75,000 a year, additional money does not increase your happiness. Yet, most people sacrifice relationships, health, and joy in pursuit of more, only to regret it later. But don't get it twisted. Let's be clear. Money is important. No one is saying you shouldn't have financial security. But here's what you learn at 70. Wealth without meaningful relationships is just an expensive emptiness. Status without love is just loneliness in a bigger house. Think of celebrities like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, or Marilyn Monroe. They had everything: fame, fortune, success. But in their final moments, they were surrounded by luxury and yet completely alone. At 70, the real question isn't how much do I own? It's who do I have? Because your bank account won't hold your hand, your trophies won't wipe your tears, and your job title won't bring you peace. But if money and status don't guarantee fulfillment, what about relationships? Well, let's talk about something even more surprising. Number 3, toxic relationships and grudges. So let me ask you something. How many years have you wasted being mad at someone who isn't even thinking about you? And be honest, you're holding on to that grudge, carrying all that weight, and for what? To prove a point? To teach them a lesson? Newsflash, they've moved on. By 70, you finally understand that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. But let's be real. Forgiveness is hard. And I get it, because some people, they don't deserve it. Some people betrayed you, hurt you, and never even apologized. But tell me this, does your anger change what happened? Does it fix anything? Or are you the one suffering while they live their life completely unbothered? Example that will make you think. I knew an 80-year-old man who spent 40 years not speaking to his brother over an argument about, get this, a loan of just a few $100s. Decades passed, and when his brother died, guess what? The only thing left was regret. He told me, I won the argument, but I lost my brother. What a stupid trade. And if you think grudges don't hurt you, think again. According to research from Johns Hopkins University, people who hold on to resentment are at a 250% higher risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and stress-related illness. Your anger isn't punishing them, it's killing you. This doesn't mean you should let toxic people back into your life. Some people don't deserve a second chance, and that's the truth. But forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook, it's about setting yourself free. A woman in her 70s once told me, I spent years hating my ex-husband. Then one day I realized he was out there happy, remarried, enjoying life, and I was the one suffering. Why was I letting someone I despised still control my emotions? That day, she let it go. Not for him, but for herself. So let me ask you this. Who are you still mad at, and is it worth it? Comment below, because I guarantee someone watching this right now is stuck in the same battle, and maybe today is the day they finally let go. But if grudges are toxic, what about the pressure to impress others? Well, let's talk about that next. And trust me, this one will make you rethink everything. Point number 4, impressing others. Let me tell you something my uncle, a philosopher, told me years ago. He said, a man who lives for the applause of others will die the moment they stop clapping. At the time I laughed. I thought, well, what's wrong with wanting people to admire you? But now, after seeing life through his eyes, I finally understand. And if you're over 70, I bet you do too. For most of our lives, we play a game of looking successful, looking attractive, looking important. But here's the thing about pretending. It's exhausting. And by 70, you're too damn tired to care. Here is a lesson I learned from my philosopher uncle. One day, I asked my uncle why he stopped wearing expensive suits, stopped trying to be charming, stopped caring about impressing people. He smiled and said, because I realized no one actually cares. They clap today, they forget tomorrow. But the moment I stopped performing, that's when I truly became free. Think about it. Who are you really dressing up for? Who are you posting on social media for? Who are you buying things you don't need for? Strangers, people who won't even remember your name in 10 years. Data that might shock you. A psychological study from the University of Toronto found that most people overestimate how much others notice them. In reality, people are too focused on their own lives to care about yours, yet we waste years trying to impress people who are barely paying attention. I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of yourself. I'm saying that by 70, you realize something powerful. Confidence isn't in the clothes, the cars, or the compliments. Confidence is knowing who you are without needing a round of applause. A woman in her 70s once told me, I used to dye my hair, wear uncomfortable clothes, and pretend to be someone I wasn't. Then one day I asked myself, who am I doing this for? The answer? Nobody worth my energy. So I let it all go, and guess what? I've never felt more beautiful. So tell me, who are you still trying to impress, and why? Drop a comment below, because if you're still living for the applause, maybe it's time to finally take off the mask. Point number 5, FOMO, which can also be called fear of missing out. My uncle once told me, the man who runs after every feast will die with an empty stomach. At the time I thought he was just being dramatic, but now I see the truth. And if you're over 70, I bet you do too. For most of our lives, we're taught that missing out is a failure. You need to attend every event, say yes to every invitation, be part of every conversation. Because if you don't, you're falling behind. But let me ask you something. Falling behind how? You spend years believing that if you're not everywhere, you're nowhere. That if you're not keeping up, you're losing. But here's what no one tells you. Missing out is often the best thing that can happen to you. I remember telling my uncle, I don't want to miss out on life. And he laughed. Actually left. Then he said, what exactly are you missing out on? Noise? Distraction? The illusion of importance? A man at peace is not missing out, he is free. Think about it. How many parties did you go to that you don't even remember? How many trendy things did you buy that you don't even use? How many times did you force yourself to show up somewhere just because you thought you should? And for what? Studies from the National Institute of Mental Health show that people who constantly chase social validation through events, trends, and social media are more likely to experience anxiety and depression. The more you try to be involved, the less satisfied you actually feel. By 70, you realize something powerful. Missing out on the things that don't serve you means gaining peace. While the world runs around in circles, you get to sit back, breathe, and enjoy the silence. And silence, my uncle told me, is where wisdom lives. I vividly remember when a 72-year-old man told me, I used to say yes to everything because I didn't want to feel left out. Now I say no because I don't want to feel drained. And for the first time, I actually feel present in my own life. So tell me, what are you afraid of missing out on? And is it actually worth your time? Drop a comment below, because if you still think FOMO is real, maybe it's time to redefine what really matters. And speaking of things that don't matter, let's talk about one of the biggest lies society sells you. Point number 6, society's definition of success. If success was about money, power, and fame, then why are some of the wealthiest people in the world still miserable? Society lied to us. It told us that success is about climbing higher, earning more, being recognized. But after 70, you realize something shocking. None of that actually mattered. I used to believe that success meant being the best, winning, proving myself. I worked hard, sacrificed sleep, chased every opportunity. But then I watched my uncle, a philosopher, live his life with none of those things. No fancy title, no big salary, no awards. And yet, he was the happiest man I knew. One day I asked him, how can you be successful when you've achieved nothing by society's standards? He smiled and said, because I never let society define success for me. You'll understand one day. Now, years later, I do. Success isn't about what you achieve. It's about what you leave behind. Go ask a man in his 70s what his biggest accomplishment is. It won't be his job title. It won't be how much money he made. It will be the lives he touched, the people he loved, the wisdom he shared. Because when you're gone, no one will remember what you earned. They'll remember how you made them feel. A Harvard study on adult development, which tracked people for over 80 years, found that happiness in later life had nothing to do with career success or money. It came down to relationships and purpose. The hard takeaway: at 70, you realize success isn't about climbing higher. It's about looking back and knowing you lived well. So let me ask you, are you chasing success, or are you actually living? Drop a comment below, because the truth might just surprise you. And that leads us to another thing that loses its importance after 70, and this one might hit even harder. Point number 7, rushing through life. If life was a race, then why do so many people reach the finish line, full of regret? Think about it. We spend our youth chasing deadlines, rushing through milestones, always asking, what's next? But after 70, you finally understand, there is no finish line, just moments you either lived or missed. Ever watched The Bucket List, starring Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson? Two men, one a billionaire, the other a mechanic, both given a few months to live. The rich man had everything: money, power, a legacy. But guess what? He never actually lived. He rushed through life so fast, chasing success, that he never stopped to enjoy it. And in the end, he was the loneliest man in the room. Meanwhile, the man who had little, he found joy in the simple things. A good laugh, a deep conversation, a meaningful experience. And he was the one who truly lived before he died. So let me ask you, are you living or just existing? Because when you're always rushing to the next big thing, you don't realize something tragic. You're skipping the only life you've got. A study from Harvard found that people who slow down and savor life's small moments report 30% higher happiness levels in old age. Meanwhile, those who rushed through life most regret it. Not the missed promotions, not the money they didn't make. They regret not being present. I once met an 80-year-old man who said, "I spent my life running toward a future I never even got to enjoy. Now I walk slow, not because I have to, but because I finally understand that life is in the small steps, not the big leaps." The slower you go, the more you see. So let me ask you, what's the last moment you truly enjoyed without thinking about the next? Drop a comment, because this one will hit different. If you've made it this far, first, thank you. It means you're not just watching, you're thinking. And if this video gave you something to reflect on, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We drop videos daily to remind you of one thing: wisdom isn't in the past, it's in every moment you choose to live. Point number 8, regrets and what-ifs. Regret is the heaviest thing you'll ever carry. And yet, most people spend their lives collecting it, stacking up what-ifs like unpaid bills. But let me ask you this: does regret change the past? Does it rewrite the story? Or does it just drain the years you still have left? By 70, you realize something no one tells you when you're younger. Regret is just wasted energy. All the time you spend wishing you had done things differently is time you could be using to do something about it now. The pain of looking back versus the power of moving forward. A woman in her 70s once told me, "I regret not traveling, not saying yes more, not living." And for a while, that regret crushed her. Until one day she woke up and asked herself, do I want to spend the rest of my life mourning the past, or making new experiences with the time I have left? That's when she packed a bag and finally started seeing the world. Because regret only has power if you let it. A study from Cornell University found that over 75% of people's biggest regrets in old age aren't about things they did. They're about things they didn't do. The risks they avoided. The love they never expressed. The dreams they pushed aside. And here's the painful part. By the time most people realize it, it's too late. You can't change the past, but you can decide whether to keep reliving it. At 70, you have two choices: spend your days looking backward, or finally start moving forward. And if you're still breathing, then guess what? You still have time. The past is a lesson, not a life sentence. So what's one thing you wish you had done? And more importantly, what's stopping you from doing it now? Drop a comment, because this is the kind of conversation that matters. And this brings us to the final two things that lose their meaning after 70. And trust me, the next one is something everyone struggles with. Point number 9, chasing perfection. For years I chased perfection, saying the right things, dressing the right way, trying to be someone the world would approve of. And then one day, my philosopher uncle sat me down and said, "Perfection is the greatest lie ever told." And the saddest part? Most people waste their lives believing it. At the time, I shrugged it off. But when I hit my 60s, it finally dawned on me, he was right. The world tells you to hide your flaws, cover your scars, erase the wrinkles. But by 70, you stop caring. Not because you've given up, but because you finally understand that imperfections are proof that you lived.